Hello and welcome, Happy New Year to everybody. This is the first of the New Year Ted and Andy's Graphic Adventures, which is going to be based around type and grids. So this is part one, and this is in support of your Semester 2 project, which is the Forefront Typographic Magazine. So before I start with a little demonstration of what we want you to do in the first lesson, I will talk a little bit about type and grids. So what is a grid and why? Now I'll just take an example here, which is the Sunday Times newspaper, or any newspaper. Newspapers are good examples of this. There's a grid on there. You can see the different columns of type. I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's an 8-column grid on there by looking at the columns of text, and all the way through the newspaper you will see different type weights, headlines, hierarchies of information, and different column widths. So a designer's, one of your major jobs, the bread and butter of being a designer, is taking information from a client, actual kind of text and images, and whether it's in print or whether it's digital or whether it's in exhibition design, your job is to lay it out in a clear way, a legible way, and something that's aesthetically pleasing, and also at speed. And newspapers are brilliant at this. They go to press around about 11, 12 o'clock at night, sometimes just to get the last stories in, and then they're delivered around about 5 in the morning. So the turnaround on a newspaper is incredibly fast to be able to take somebody to write the report, take the photographs, put it in, order it, get it to the printer in time, get it basically on the van and get it to the newsagents. So the grid allows you to do that at speed. Because without a grid, really, you are faced with a blank piece of paper. So I'd just like to mention that to you as well. So that's kind of, a newspaper's a good example. Now, throughout this project, we also will be showing you some examples of really good magazines. This is Baseline, which is a design magazine, which is purely based on typography, and we have an extensive collection of these. And throughout this project, we want you to basically begin, and you will begin to sort of understand and look at typography and layout in a different kind of way, looking at basically grids and working out what kind of grid is being used on here. But one of the best ways you can learn and start to learn about layout is looking at good examples of design, and there's nowhere better to look than somewhere like Baseline. So the great thing about Baseline is they have different grids on different pages depending on different articles. So we will be furnishing you with loads of those to have a look at. This one's Blueprint, which is an architectural magazine, and again, bold picture type. There'll be a grid on there. This one's got, I think this is probably a 6 or 7 column grid. And these are other magazines. There's Colours magazine, Creative Review, again, another industry one. A lot easier to see the grid on this one, maybe. But as you can see, the way it's ordered, how the hierarchies of information, what you look at first, how you dictate to the viewer what they see first. So there's loads of these around, Icon magazine, Graphic magazine. We have loads and loads of examples of these, and there will be some in the library as well. So on to the actual what we want you to actually do. So you're going to take an A2 piece of trace. Everybody is going to be provided with an A2 piece of tracing paper. And before I just go to that, I just want to basically, because we are going to be measuring with this, I just want to basically reiterate the sort of general standard sizes of the A sizes. That's A2, which is 594 by 420. This is A3, which is half that distance, which is 297, and this is 420, and then A4 works like that, and that is 297 by 210. Yeah? So it's basically just as simple as that, and A5 is that again, and A6 is down again. So you need to be able to sort of like begin to commit those kind of measurements to memory. Also, before I start, what kind of equipment do we actually want you to bring in for the first session? Number one, you'll need your ruler. You will also need a pencil. Not that one, it's obviously too big. What we recommend is that probably an H pencil, very sharp indeed. Or if you've got a clutch pencil, that's great, because we're going to be doing some quite accurate measuring. And if you use an HB or a 2B or 3B, your grid measurements will go out slightly. We'll also be utilising during this project your fine liners, which everybody's got a range of those in the pack, 0.8, 0.5 and 0.1. You'll need a rubber, and that's really all you need for doing the grid. So without much further ado, you will all be given one of these, which is actually the measurements of the grid, run out on A3. So it's got all the measurements on here for you to transpose onto A2. Just a word of caution, I have had students who've done this project before initially and then just put this over the top and trace that round. That's not the case. This here is not actually the right size. This is a miniature version, but it has all the measurements on it. So I'll be referring back to that as we go through. So everybody will be given a piece of A2 tracing paper. There it is. And step number one is as simple as dividing it in two. So the ruler comes in here, divide it into two. Halfway is 297, 297. Put a tick at the top, and then just half it. Pencil like that, so you have the half. Do not, under any circumstances, and I've seen people do this again, I've seen students folding it, which is wrong. We want you to use the ruler and your pencil and the measurements. So once you've divided it that way, we also want you to divide it the other to find the centre point. That's quite easily done by basically putting your ruler to the naught up at the top of the page and going down 21 and 21. And then what you do then is once you've got your two reference points, you can then go across and voila, you have the centre point. So again, all these measurements are on here, but to start off from the centre we will work out. So once you've done that, take a couple of minutes. Here's what I prepared earlier, and what we have here, we have the centre points, but also we have the top of the page, and I'll just show you in the sides. So that's 260 that way, 260 that way. So the way I did that was just go from the centre point and measure 260 out. I've done it at the bottom there with reference points, and I will draw that in now, just to finish off the actual page layout. So take my pencil and across. So what we have there now is actually the boundaries of your page size, and this is really important. What you'll also notice on the sheet here, which you'll all be given, is the margins. So I'm just going to draw the margins in. There's margins around the sides, the top and the bottom. The top margin is 30 millimeters, so I simply now measure down 30, and then I can then basically draw that in, like so, which I've done there. And then the bottom is 20, so I can just measure up 20 from the bottom, like so, and then I measure 20 up from this end. 2 points that I then can then put my ruler onto, and then I can then draw the bottom of the margins. The sides of the margins are 20 in. I've already drawn those in there. I'll just finish those off. There we go. And then this one here, 20 in from the left hand edge. So what I have now is I have the outer line delineating the page size. I have a smaller box in the middle, and that basically has margins of 20 and 20, 30 and 20. Again, it's all on here, but the next thing to do is also your gutter, what's called a gutter. Another thing while you're doing this project over the months, you'll pick up the terminology that is associated with the subject area. So the gutters are is the space in between your columns. And here we have a slightly wider, this is 25 millimeters, that's 20. And the reason why that is, when you've probably opened a magazine or something like that, you get, in the middle of here, things start disappearing into the margin. So therefore your margins in the middle tend to be 5 or 6 or 10 millimeters bigger than the outside edge, because you don't want your information disappearing into the middle of the book or the magazine. So once you've done that, you essentially now have two basically large columns. Now what we're going to do now is, just on the final one, Again, as you can go back to this, you can see that this is then divided up into a 6-column grid on a single page, and then there's a 6-column on the other. This is merely a reflection of that. So I'll just go to my third and final one. And here we have, as you can see, the outside edge, the actual inside with the 20, 30, 25, 20, and then here we have a column width of 30, a gutter of 7, 37, 37, 37, 37 all the way through. So if you produce those with pencils, like I've done here, and I've already done them lightly in pencil, to finish it off I use my 0.5 or 0.8 fine liner to then just go over the top of my pencil. So always work in pencil first to get your actual grid up, and then when you're confident it's right, you simply then just have to basically go over it with a black pen to sort of finalise that. So this is incredibly easy to input into a computer. The reason why we get everybody every year to actually draw up the grid at actual size is so that for you now then know actually how big you're designing to. This is the size that you'll be designing to on the computer. Now the majority of you will be kind of working on laptops or screen, and you will not be working at actual size really. Well, you will be working at actual size on the thing, but you'll be zooming in and out. So it's really important before you start to actually know what exactly is the scale of it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how this grid works in a kind of way, slightly getting ahead of myself, but you're going to end up with sort of, you know, some layouts like this eventually. So that is your page size, and this is the grid you'll be inputting into InDesign. I'll come to that in a minute. So as you can see, when I put that grid over the top of the layout, it sort of like makes sense, and you can see where the student has basically worked with the grid, or the scaffolding as I like to call it, which a grid essentially is. It is scaffolding for your layout. It allows you to have some structure there, and when the grid is taken away, basically you can still see the structure, but maybe not as obviously as it would be if you put the grid on. I'll show you another one here. This is another layout the student did a few years ago. So this is how you would be mounting them finely flat. But again, you can just put the grid over the top, and you begin to see how the student has actually used the grid to put the blocks and the layout. And this project is about composition as much as anything. It's a practical exercise. It's about layout. It's about positive and negative space, about how you use that. I'll just put a final one on. Here we go. This one here, Bauhaus one. Okay. Now, once you get to grips with grids, we're giving you a 6-column grid. We've already worked it out for you, but basically you can work to any grid that you want to come up with. But my recommendation is you keep things in whole numbers, or at least 0.5s. This grid's quite good because it's kind of reasonably flexible. There's sort of 12 across it. It has a reasonably good margin, and you know, it's pretty even, as I say. So it's a pretty standard grid. But I mean, I think most people want to stick to that just before you find your feet with this project. So there, yeah. So that is, in essence, what you will be doing in the first hour of the first lesson. You'll be basically going through that. We will give you all the bits and pieces, but if everybody could bring up those things with them, the pencils and the fine liners and the ruler, oh yes, the rubber as well, because the rubber will allow you then eventually to rub out all the pencil marks, so you end up with basically your actual grid. So yeah, I think that's about it. Oh no, sorry, I'll finish off with that. Yeah, InDesign is going to be the program you'll be using with Chris on this. So it's time, unfortunately, to cut those ties with Photoshop. Photoshop will be used on the project, but it'll purely be used for your photographs, obviously Photoshop, and or your pictures, your imagery. So whether you want to basically up the colour balance of them or check the resolution, things like that. But this project is primarily a layout exercise in InDesign. Some of you might know InDesign already, have the basics of it, but those that don't worry, because basically it's quite an easy program to get to grips with. But that is the program we will be using. Just before I finish, a few books as well. Now I know that you've probably seen Type Matters. And you know, that's a good standard one. There's lots of kind of books on layout, I have, there's loads and loads. Check on the library, the reading list that's also on the back of the brief as well. This is Designing with Type by James Craig. Lots of really good stuff in there as well. Another one which is fantastic, Stop Stealing Sheep by Eric Speakerman and E.M. Ginger. This again is in the library, fantastic book really. So this worth investing in really. There's lots of another book here on layout, the basics of layout. And this one's a good one as well, Reviving the Rules of Typography About Face. I could stand here with a stack of about 50 or 100 books on layout. This is a particularly good one because it goes through the history, some really lovely layouts in there that you can learn a lot from and you can get a lot of inspiration from. Some fantastic stuff in this one. I think it's in the library. If you can pick up a copy on eBay or wherever, I'd thoroughly recommend it. So that's the first instalment of Type and Grids, part 1. So I just wanted to basically introduce you to the concept of drawing up a grid on tracing paper. I think that's about it really. Ted?